Okay, hello. Today is the 9th of February 2022, and we'll pay homage to two architects, J.J.P. Oud, a Dutch architect and an important architect, and then a Belgian architect, Antoine Pomp. So I will begin with J.J.P. Oud. Philip Johnson, this is interesting, and I thought of starting with this. Somebody described him, it wasn't me, I don't know what it means, the Caesar Lord of Architecture, would cite three moments that turned him towards the profession, meaning towards architecture. A visit to Chartres Cathedral as a 13 years old, a visit to the Parthenon in 1928, and a small row of workers' houses in the Hoek van Holland by J.J.P. Oud. And they became actually friends, and they had an extensive correspondence, writing to each other. Philip Johnson even invited J.J.P. Oud to build a house for his mother, if you can imagine. Usually architects build themselves for their own mothers, but in this case, Philip Johnson invited Oud, and he did make a project, but the house was not built. Anyway, so Jacobus Johannes Peter Oud, commonly called J.J.P. Oud, was born on February 9th, 1890, was a Dutch architect. His fame began as a follower of the Steel movement. Oud was born in Purmerend, the son of a tobacco and wine merchant. As a young architect, he was influenced by Berlage and studied under Theodor Fischer in Munich for a time. He worked together with Dudok in Leiden, which is where he also met Theo van Doesburg and became involved with the movement De Stijl. Between 1918 and 1933, Oud became municipal housing architect for Rotterdam. During this period, when many laborers were coming to the city, he mostly worked on socially progressive residential projects. This included projects in the areas of Spangen, Kiefhoek, and Wittedorp. I have problems with the Dutch language, I confess. I cannot pronounce easily Dutch words. Oud was one of a number of Dutch architects who attempted to reconcile strict, rational, so-called scientific, cost-effective construction technique against the psychological needs and aesthetic expectations of the users. His own answer was to practice poetic functionalism. In 1927, he was one of the 15 architects who contributed to the influential modernist Weissenhof Estate exhibition in Stuttgart. In America, Oud is perhaps known for being lauded and adopted by the mainstream modernist movement, then summarily kicked out on stylistic grounds, and you'll understand later why. As of 1932, he was considered one of the four greatest modern architects, along Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Walter Gropius, and Le Corbusier. Can you imagine? And was proeminently featured in Philip Johnson's International Style exhibition. Johnson maintained a correspondence with Oud, tried to help him get work, commissioned a house for his mother, which I just said, never built, and sent him socks and bicycle tires. Can you believe it? A very beautiful, I think, little addition. Sent him socks and bicycle tires. Very nice of Philip Johnson. In 1945, after the end of the Second World War, allowed photographs of Oud's Shell headquarters building in The Hague to be published in America. But the architectural press sarcastically condemned his use of ornament, it was called embroidery, as contrary to the spirit of modernism. And apparently with that building from 1941, Shell headquarters, his downfall began. After World War II, Oud designed the Dutch National War Monument in Amsterdam and the monument of the Military War Cemetery in Grebeberg. By then, he had mostly let go of any De Stijl influences. He continued to take a highly individualistic stance against mainstream modernism. He designed projects such as the Sparbank in Rotterdam, which you are going to see, office building, the Utrecht in Rotterdam, and the Children's Health Center in Arnhem. Oud's brother, Peter Oud, was mayor of Rotterdam. Oud died in 1963 at the age of 73 in this place, Wassenaar. Okay, so this was the man who shared the enviable position of being one of the four most important modern architects near Gropius, Mies van der Rohe, and Le Corbusier. So we are looking at an architect who, meant something for modern architecture. Here he is in his older age. He became more mellow somehow, mellowed by by his non-conformism of returning to ornament at a time when modern architecture would strongly oppose it, still strongly oppose it. Okay, so some drawings by J.J.P. Oud for furniture, for chairs. Many architects design chairs, and I keep saying that it's a therapeutic exercise for an architect to imagine a chair, to design a chair, and in a way it's a self-portrait. And it's perhaps Mies van der Rohe was right when he said, at least sometimes, or maybe this is my addition, a chair is more difficult to design than a skyscraper. Watercolor. Sorry about the resolution here. Here we see clearly the steel aesthetics clearly assumed. This was built, and you are going to see it. Now, portrait of J.J.P. Oud by Theo van Doesburg. Well, it could have been him, or it could have been something else, someone else, maybe even Theo van Doesburg himself, maybe. Anyway, now a house in this area, which I would prefer to give the chance to you to pronounce it. I really have difficulties with Dutch language. How is one supposed to pronounce this? I asked once in a plane a stewardess how to pronounce correctly Vincent van Gogh, and she did tell me, and to this day I'm not sure I pronounce correctly Vincent van Gogh, somehow on the nose. And then how do you pronounce Rem Koolhaas? Because it's not Rem Koolhaas as most people pronounce. It's Rem Koolhaas, still with a double O. It still remains an O, not an U, like in English. So this is the house that I mentioned. What can we say? I mean, yes, it is modern, all right. Does it still exist? I do not know. But it's kind of interesting when you look at it like this, in this black and white photograph from that time, around 100 years ago. It's solitude, a monument to solitude somehow. It exists, it's even refurbished and so on. Well, what can we say? Yes, and J.J.P. Oud. Interesting, the round columns here. You would normally expect something like this for this kind of building. So this is an early work by him. Now, worker housing in Rotterdam, which I don't know if they are exactly those that Philip Johnson admired so much. And there are many, as you can see. These social preoccupations of some other Dutch architects, including Oud, move me. I think an architect does have social obligations, and to dedicate his or her talent to social concerns is probably even a duty. And I think he did good works. I don't know if this is this particular, because he built many such complexes of houses. If this is the one that Philip Johnson looked at and was inspired by, beyond Chartres and the Parthenon. Now, another complex of social housing in Rotterdam from 1920. So this is from 100 years ago. I like these works. I continue to like them. It's something about them. I like equality between people. You think I'm against luxurious villas and so on. I mean against. I'm not against Villa Rotonda or La Rotonda or Villa Capra, but still, this gives me actually hope somehow, where people are equal, and they share, apartments that are identical, almost identical, maybe even without almost. Well, I'm sure it helped. Now, I don't know if his brother was mayor of Rotterdam at that time, but when his brother was the mayor, I imagine it helped in order to, get such commissions. Now, village, or it's called Garden Village from 1922. This is 6 years before Le Corbusier built his Villa Savoie. And look, there are many buildings here, for God's sake. And I like them, they are rural. They are rural. And really, this shows again the incredible openness of the Dutch, to build in so many ways and, experiment. Behind, we see different kinds of buildings. And then we see this village. And this is still part of what is called the city of the future, Rotterdam. And these houses are very similar to houses built, previously, actually, even in Denmark. Hans Wegner, the king of chairs, the great Danish designer, lived in such a house. You see, there are no sidewalks. You just walk directly from the street into the house, into the apartment. It's okay. I think it's okay. Now I myself am a little bit emotional, because I look at these pictures from maybe 100 years ago, or around that, or anyway, older pictures, and I see people like you and me, living even with sidewalks and not many cars, in fact none, and the road is as it is, but the building is still proclaiming, I would say, an obvious modernity, and thus escapes the hunger of time to erode everything and to eat up everything. Maybe this is what Philip Johnson admired. It's possible. And here they are now. Yeah, J.J.P out. The cars showed up, and so did the sidewalks, but the sidewalks are occupied by the cars. Anyway, he didn't build these buildings here, just it's a garden village, as it was described. Okay, so should we analyze a little bit the plan? So that would be probably a little bit too technical. I grew up in communism, and actually I have a liking for this kind of projects. I myself did once a project for I forgot, or 5,000 people or something like this, and I really enjoyed it. And it was urbanism essentially. Um, okay, now a cafe. We saw the drawing, the project for this, the cafe in Rotterdam, 1925. Here it is in the present. This time he was already friends with Theo van Doesburg and part of the Steel movement. He is considered the most important, he was, although now we know more about Rietveld and even Theo van Doesburg than about Oud, but he was considered at least potentially the most important architect of the Steel movement. Again, we must not forget that at least at one point he was considered one of the most important four architects of modernity, together with Gropius, Le Corbusier, and Mies van der Rohe. That's not a little thing at all. This is how the cafe looks now. I like this modesty, and the egalitarian spirit. 1925. Now, talking about egalitarian spirit and contemplating that limousine, it would be a little bit oxymoronic somehow. But what a difference between what we look at here and what we looked at in those old pictures, black and white, with no car on the roads, with no sidewalks and so on. Maybe this is progress, maybe, but okay, other workers' houses from 1926, 1927. These are a little bit more so-called architectural, but interesting too. Now, he was a good architect, no doubt. But at one point, something happened to him, and that is because he said we are supposed to experiment, to search for new things, and he assumed bringing in ornament, discreetly still, but he did. But this work from before the war, 1920s, I think is remarkable in its audacious whiteness and modernity. Interesting architect, J.J.P. Out. Now, a row of five houses in Weissenhof. This was a colony that Stuttgart built. A very interesting, again, experiment where Mies van der Rohe was in charge of the site planning, and important architects were invited, like Le Corbusier, Hans Scharoun, Oud, and others. Mies himself built there. So let's look at the work of J.J.P. Oud from 1927. Weissenhof, Stuttgart. A similar experiment, if I am to call it so, happened in Vienna a few years later, which I saw, where important architects were invited to build modest houses, meaning with a low budget, but high-end architectures, if I am to call it so, by but with a low budget. So you had important architects building, houses for almost anyone, for Mr. Anyone. This is architecture, and it's good architecture, and it's by J.J.P. out in Stuttgart, 1927. Again, as a guiding mark, in 1928, Le Corbusier built Villa Savoie. Interesting, these courtyards, actually, and the rhythm of these five houses is has a certain level of monumentality in its simplicity. Also, the disappearance almost of common window, so to speak. I mean, we have one here, but the other windows are rather escape the predictability of what might be called a normal window. It's clear architecture is an abstract art, but Out himself welcomed the embroidery a little bit later, although it's not really an embroidery. We are going to see what irritated so much the the critics and so on. And I read that his downfall happened because of that. Is this building, the Shell headquarters in The Hague, from 1938 to 1948. So it started before the war, and then it was continued, the construction, after the war. The Shell headquarters. This is an interesting website with an extensive article about this building, the Shell building and all its crimes. Well, it's a reference to Ornament and Crime, the essay by Adolf Loos, because there is actually a discrete ornamentation there. I like also the name of this website, Declad. Instead of cladding, like using a makeup on a building or on the walls, to declad. In other words, to take off the makeup. So the Shell building by J.J.P. Out was a building that was both ahead and behind the times when it was built. A building that irrevocably damaged the reputation of its designer for the crime of adding ornamentation, but has perhaps unfairly not been reappraised since it was finished. So this is the plan, perfectly symmetrical. Yes, he tried to bring back to architecture something that he thought modernity was increasingly lacking. Formalization, a composition. I don't know enough about how to pronounce myself in this matter. I like very much the works we already saw, but this building, yes, it does seem to welcome a little bit a certain formalism, and there seems to be something here that might justify what this the author of this article said here. Sorry. You see that it was a building that was ahead of the times, but also behind the times. And what was behind was this this composition, architectural composition, which was not truly modern any longer. But there is an exchange of letters between Philip Johnson and Out, where Aoun defended his position. He said, you know, if I'm considered conventional by using a strategy or a method that was always used in the history of architecture, let me then be called conventional. You know, this was maybe the most severe, unacceptable crime, that he did something like this here, you know. Is it really a crime? I mean, anyway, apparently his reputation was severely damaged by this building, and he received very few commissions afterwards. The Shell headquarters. Now, this bank, which I mentioned from 1942, 1957, the Sparbank in Rotterdam, and the bank it is. I like the columns though, you know, they are creative, although very simple, and they respect what I always mention, that it is important to respect the three sides, you know, three parts of a column: the base, the column, the shaft, and then the capital. Simplified, of course, it's not like the Parthenon. Okay, now this building from 1950 to 1960, it's, I don't know who did the artwork, the building is his, still modern. Sorry about the resolution. Now an office building in Utrecht from 1954, 1961. Is this remarkable? I'm not so sure, but I still like more the early works, it's true. Now the National Monument with this sculpture in Amsterdam from 1956, and it does look like a monument indeed. In Amsterdam, the sculptures are good. I don't know about the architecture. I don't know if this lion or whatever it is part of the complex. It's still, I don't know. I mean, the level of abstraction or modernity maybe is not satisfactory by today's standards. But something happened, you know. I mean, Rotterdam itself was destroyed in good measure by the Second World War. So the consciousness of society, of the country, and of whole of Europe was changed. So maybe that you know, undisturbed belief in a clean, you know, absolute modernity was gone. Some doubts showed up. Anyway, even this monument, I think it has some monumentality, if nothing else. Now, some furniture designs by Aud, interesting lamp. Not much ornamentation here. A chair, an armchair. Another one. These are more graphic, but I'm not sure I would like to sit for too long on such a chair. And his grave, a grave which is, I would say, significantly different from his architecture, at least his early works, indeed. When you think about the almost absolute modernity of his early works, and you see the grave is really about something else. It's graves are sad as they are, but anyway. So now we'll go to the second architect we'll talk about today, and this is a Belgian architect. I knew absolutely nothing about, even about his existence before. Just yesterday I found out about him, but he has some interesting things to tell us. Antoine Pomp, born in 1873, and ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about an architect who lived here for 107 years. So, he lived a long life. But what is strange also is that this man who lived for 107 years, he actually, as far as I learned from the websites I consulted, he didn't do any architecture. So in his last at least 40 years. So Antoine Pompe, unfortunately, I used the information from the French Wikipedia, or the French-speaking Belgian Wikipedia, because it had more information. So allow me please to quickly translate what is here. So he is a Belgian architect active in Brussels or Brussels, who announced modernism in the architecture since 1910. At a time when Art Nouveau was still powerful there. So he was born in Brussels, studied at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels, and then he worked as a designer or draftsperson in various offices. He returned to Brussels. He worked also for Victor Horta, the great Belgian architect, and apparently he drew the plans for the pavilion for the Congo Universal Exhibition in the year 1900 in Paris. And his career as an architect by himself started rather late. It says at the age of 35, if we can call it that late. As an assistant, well, no, actually, not yet on his own. As an assistant of the architect Ademar Lener, with whom he worked for this competition, Le Grand Hotel, and he was apparently involved in the construction of a Hotel de Luxe, luxury hotel, hotel number 3. And only at 37, he built his first work, personal work, the clinic of the Dr. Van Neck, and we are going to see it, which is an excellent work. He participated also in the construction of Cité Jardin, garden cities, in various places in Belgium. And in 1937, he built his own house. We are going to see his own house. He was a professor of architecture, of technical drawing, and working in wood. and he taught at the School of Drawing and Decorative Arts in that place, and then at the School of Industrial Arts and Decorative Decorations Institute of, anyway. He participated in various competitions, and let's look at the man. I mean, really, you know, an important architect that I don't know how old he was here, but again, we are talking about a gentleman who lived until the age of 107. I don't even know if there was ever an architect. I thought that Oscar Niemeyer, who died very old, but Oscar Niemeyer, I think, died at 102. This man here in this picture is 100. I don't know if he is here 107 years old. I don't know what he has there. At first, I thought he's in a little, you know, I don't know. Was he having breakfast, or there are pencils or something? Anyway, I like the expression of this man. This is not a man with a, you know, with a happy-go-lucky face. I like him as a young man too, with this interesting salopette, or I don't know what it is, you know. Interesting man, I think. And his architecture is not bad. I still need time to digest it, so to speak. But this is, again, an architect I knew absolutely nothing of until yesterday. So it's a discovery for me. Here he is, maybe 100 something years. I don't know what, maybe some kind of, you know, tapestry, very precious behind him. Anyway, an interesting man. Drawings by Antoine Pomp. Unfortunately, his name is a little bit, you know, auspicious for, you know, entertaining the thought that between Pomp and Pomp might be a relationship. But his buildings are not pompous. No, they are not. This is one of them, and we are going to see it built. I like his architecture. You know, it's you know, I only think of either modernity or tradition, but somehow he was able to negotiate between the two. This is a book or something, you know, Antoine Pomp with a building he designed, and I don't know if he built. And here we see Antoine Pomp ou l'architecture du sentiment. Antoine Pomp, or the architecture of feeling. Well, that's a nice title, isn't it? You know, how many architectures of feeling, of sentiment are there in the world? Not many. Now, that's how on the French or Belgian, you know, French language Wikipedia shows samples of his art, of his architecture, divided by, you know, these chapters. Immeubles du style, buildings of the style Art Nouveau, geometrical Art Nouveau. This Palace Hotel, he was the assistant of the architect Ademar Lenet from 1908, 1909. So he was just the assistant of that architect, but apparently he had a role. This is how the building looks now. He built in Brussels, in Bruxelles. I never knew exactly how to pronounce correctly. Bruxelles, like in French, or Brussels, like in English. So this was an early work, working for somebody else. I'm sure he had some contributions here, but what exactly that contribution was, I do not know. Paris Hotel, salon de coiffure, in Romanian frizerie, sau coiffeur, if it is for ladies. Quite rich and engaging. I mean, look at these cabinets filled with all kinds of little things, who knows. Anyway, it is a palace indeed, and a hotel. Plenty of chairs, plenty of people, imposing columns, imposing ceiling, and even more imposing this addition of a modern contemporary building, which is, in my opinion, rather overdoing it. So the building by where, our celebrated today Antoine Pomp worked is this one. Now, buildings in transition between Art Nouveau geometrical Art Nouveau, and modernism. So somewhere in between Art Nouveau and modernism in Belgium. This is his first work done by himself as an independent architect, and it's a good work. The Clinic of Dr. Van Neck from 1910. And I like this building. It is illustrated on sites on the web for special facades. And it's not just the facade; it is the whole building. But I think it's very creative. Now, these windows, these openings here actually are changed now. This is how, I guess, initially the building was done. I like the bow windows, the asymmetrical positioning at the entrance of this balcony. There is quality here, clearly, and creativity. Lately, I understood Belgium and Brussels, they decided to classify, his buildings to become part of the, to be saved from demolition or whatever, to be protected by the city and by the country through laws and regulations. Good. It's a good building. I like it. It has ambiguities. It has a hybridity. It's looking both ways, like Janus, towards the past and towards the future. Antoine Pompe. Well, the elements are working. I mean, wind, rain, snow. Well, there isn't much snow any longer. Even in Bucharest, we only had a little bit of snow, a little bit in one day. That's it. The whole winter until now. Despite warning messages from all kinds of sources that an incredible winter will come upon us, it didn't. And I don't know if it will. So something is happening, it's true. Last year we didn't have a winter, and this year also we didn't have a winter. So you see now these are changed, but still is a good building and an interesting facade. His earliest work done independently. And again, I like, you would expect when you look at the top, perfect symmetry, but things change on the first floor. On the ground floor, you see the window, the entrance is asymmetrical. There are different conditions. This window is different from this one. And the balcony remains centered, but the entrance is off-centered. Interesting building. And I think he liked bow windows. And this is shown here, but in other buildings as well. As I said at other times, the entrance into a building is an eventful, threshold, so to speak, between the outside and the inside. And normally, under normal conditions, you honor it in a certain way, with a certain emphasis on its beauty or, in its interesting parts to invite you inside the building. An entrance which rejects you, in my opinion, it fails in its function. Its function is to welcome you, not to reject you. That's why it's an entrance and not an exit. Some images from the inside. Well, the inside, it is as it is. It's a clinic after all. The balcony, as it was mentioned, this is a building at the transition between Art Nouveau and modernism. I actually, maybe you say I have a perverse, disposition, but I like it more, here than here somehow. But it's true. I like ruins. Here is his name, Pomp, architect from 1910. The building. Now Maison, good, Avenue Molière. This year is a special year. I forgot exactly, since the birth of Molière or since he died, but I am going to launch a competition, a house for Molière. Because how would you do a house for, a hypochondriac, let's say? Because Molière wrote about a hypochondriac. Well, how would you do a house for a hypochondriac as an architect? Here again, there are interesting things. These bow windows, which he liked, and the entrance into the building again has a certain complexity. So there is a level of richness here. The house is squeezed between two other buildings, but it's still saying something. Is he the architect of sentiment? Maybe. I don't know enough about him now to be totally, sure of what I'm saying, but maybe. It depends what we understand by sentiment, I guess. Look at these insertions in the window. Who would do something like this today? Sorry, such things which are of an ornamental nature, I think are important. But we don't do them any longer. Sorry about this. We'll come back to these houses. They should not have been here. These images. This one, unfortunately, I would have liked to see more images of these, houses, complex of houses, but I couldn't find any other information. I don't even know how they are called, but they showed up when I typed in his name. So it's possible it was by him. It would be interesting actually to compare this kind of work with what we saw done for workers' houses by J.J.P. out. Now, another building done by Antoine, Pompe and Fernand Bosson in 1916. Sorry about this resolution, but you are going to see larger pictures with the built work. It's here again, bow windows by this man who loved bow windows. So while J.J.P. out was Dutch, Antoine Pomp was Belgian. Now, realizations, buildings in a modern style. This one from 1922, but his modernism is different, very different from the one practiced by J.J.P. out, and of course, very, very, very different compared to the modernism of other modern architects. His modernism is less radical, and it still has a subtle clin d'oeil towards the past. I see here rather some possible connections with the School of Amsterdam. With less exuberance, yes. Antoine Pompe. The eternally loyal to us brick. An older picture. So, you read, you understand the functions. It's the kitchen, dining room, living room, a bedroom here, and then the stair which goes to the other floor. This is the ground floor plan. And the entrance is through the door that we just saw here. Okay, now his own house from 1937, also in Brussels. Here it is. It's refurbished. It's in good shape. It's not yet 100 years old, but I'm sure it was renovated. It's hard for me to believe that it lasted like this since 1937. No, it didn't. It's not alarmingly novel. It's not, but there are interesting things, like, for example, this sign on this window. I don't know what it means. It's cryptical, it's enigmatic. I'm curious what it means. I don't think that was, and we are going to see two more pictures with it. Antoine Pomp, architect. This was the address in Brussels. If you arrive there, maybe you will remember his name and search for his house. Some views from the inside of his books. They don't seem to be books. Maybe they are records or something, but there are books also. And I don't know. There is an air of the passage of time. There is. I still think he was an interesting character, and I am curious to know more about him. Now here, wow, what is this? I think such mysterious little things in the body of our buildings would add something to them. Even if they are esoteric, or they small accents of the unknown, symbols of the unknown. Is it some kind of cryptical signature? I'm trying to see the initials. I see a T and an A, but his name is Pomp, not why is there a T? I'm a little bit confused. Or maybe this is a triangle and the T square, like some kind of symbols for the architect. That might be it. Interesting, no? I see here kind of a T square and a rectangle. Maybe this was his, yeah, well, we don't think of such things anymore, but I think narrative architecture, even in here and there in small details, could add something to a building. Yes, once you contemplate it, maybe this will tell you this is the house of the architect, in a discrete and enigmatic and abstract way. Maybe that's what that sign means. I like it. Nice. Even if I'm not quite sure I interpreted it correctly, but it's a possible interpretation. His own house in Brussels. Now we see two more houses by him, and then we end this short presentation on Antoine Pomp. So these are houses, inspired by the English cottage. It's Maison van de Velde from 1922, which now houses, and I'm not even sure, I couldn't find any other image. I imagine this is that house, because that's what showed up when I searched for this particular house. Now it's a Zara store there. But I have more images with the second house, Maison Stevens, from 1926, which is this one. And this triangle, equilateral triangle, is it equilateral? Maybe, although this seems to be longer than, or maybe it's because of the perspective, I don't know. But this makes me think a little bit of the equilateral triangle, the large window that Duncan Ganu employed in that building he built for the law school in Canada. Was it in Toronto or Melbourne, or Toronto or Montreal? I forgot. Anyway, an interesting building, though, maybe not, very striking in its, but I think this is striking here, somehow. The Stevens house, and the ivy likes it too, and it climbs joyously on its walls. Antoine Pomp. Apparently, he was influenced by certain styles in architecture coming from England. And that's maybe, I don't know, I'm against even the word style, but maybe I should reconsider. Maybe you can do a very interesting architecture where you start from an inspiration coming from the past, from a certain so-called style. Although organically, I would react against something like this, but maybe I'm too rigid in the name of modernity. Maybe you can do a valuable architecture in this way as well. Antoine Pompe. And this is the last picture of this, preliminary study of this architect from Belgium. This picture, which we saw before, and somehow I thought of looking at it again. This is a man who lived for 107 years. And I wonder what he felt when the picture was taken of him. Thank you.